Welcome. Tonight, let us travel. There are no busy streets here, no glowing screens, no ringing telephones, no hurried messages arriving from far away. Instead, there are narrow village paths, wooden houses, stone castles, small market towns, fields stretching beneath a wide evening sky. And somewhere in this quiet world, people are thinking about love. They are thinking about marriage. They are thinking about family, work, money, land, duty, friendship, and perhaps sometimes affection. When we imagine medieval romance, it is easy to picture grand castles and noble knights. We might imagine secret meetings, beautiful gowns, and songs about distant lovers. But most medieval relationships were much quieter than that. For most people, courtship was part of ordinary life. It happened near farms and fireplaces. It happened at markets and village gatherings. It happened while people worked together, visited relatives, attended religious celebrations, or simply walked along familiar roads. Tonight, we will take a slow walk through that world. We will look at how people met. We will consider what courtship meant. We will explore the role of parents and families. We will talk about weddings, clothing, food, homes, work, and the daily life that followed marriage. And as we do, it is worth remembering that there was no single medieval experience. The Middle Ages lasted for roughly 1,000 years. A farmer in England did not live exactly like a merchant in Italy. A noble family did not follow the same customs as a poor village family, and the traditions of the year 1000 were not identical to those of the year 1400. So rather than imagining one perfect medieval world, we will slowly move through several different parts of medieval life. There will be no need to hurry. Let the old roads become quiet. Let the village fires glow softly in the distance, and imagine for a moment that the modern world has become very far away. Tonight, we are simply going to listen. The village at evening. Imagine that you are standing in a small medieval village. The sun is beginning to disappear. The fields have become darker shades of green and brown. A few people are returning from their work. A farmer carries a tool toward a wooden house. Someone is bringing water home. A child is being called inside. Smoke rises slowly from the roofs. The village is becoming quieter. There is no street lighting. There are no bright signs. The darkness arrives naturally. For ordinary people, this meant that social life was closely connected to the rhythm of daylight. People worked during the day. They rested when the work was finished. And during certain parts of the year, there were gatherings, festivals, religious celebrations, markets, and family visits. These moments could become important for young people. A young man might meet a young woman while visiting another household. They might already know each other from the village. Perhaps their families had known each other for years. Perhaps they worked in nearby fields. Perhaps they saw each other at a market. Perhaps they met during a feast or celebration. There was no modern idea of casually meeting hundreds of strangers. Most people lived among relatively small communities. Your neighbors were familiar. Your relatives were nearby. Your reputation mattered. And because communities were close, courtship was often a social process rather than a completely private one. People noticed things. Parents noticed. Neighbors noticed. Friends noticed. Sometimes this could make romance feel very public, but it could also make relationships easier to understand. People knew who belonged to which family. They knew who worked hard. They knew who had land. They knew who was trustworthy. They knew who was considered difficult. In a world without online profiles or photographs sent across the country, reputation was one of the most important forms of information. If you wanted to know something about a potential husband or wife, you might simply ask around, and people would have an answer. How young people met. Let us walk slowly through the village again. Perhaps there is a small market. People have come from nearby farms. There are baskets of vegetables. There is bread. There may be cloth, tools, pottery, animals, and other useful goods. Markets were places for buying and selling, but they were also places where people could see one another. A young person might notice someone from another household. Perhaps they had seen each other before. Perhaps they exchanged a few words. Nothing dramatic, just ordinary conversation. How is your family? Did your father finish the harvest? Will you be at the feast next week? These small conversations could matter. Courtship did not always begin with a grand declamation. Often relationships grew from familiarity. People spent time near one another. They talked. They worked. They visited.
They learned about each other's families. In farming communities, seasonal work could bring people together. Harvest time was a issue busy. Everyone had work to do. Neighbors might help one another. Families worked together for long hours. There might be songs, meals, conversation, and small moments of rest. A young person could learn a great deal about another simply noticing them work. Were they patient? Were they helpful? Did they treat other people kindly? Could they be trusted? These were practical questions. Marriage was not simply about romance. It was about building a household. And a household in the medieval world was a working unit. People needed food. They needed shelter. They needed clothing. They needed someone who could share the work. For many families, these practical concerns were extremely important. So attraction and affection existed alongside work and responsibility. Perhaps that is one of the most interesting things about medieval courtship. Love did not necessarily stand apart from ordinary life. It was woven into it. The importance of family. Now, let us move quietly from the village path toward a family home. Inside, the room is simple. There may be a central fireplace. There may be a wooden table. There are stools, beds, storage chests, cooking vessels, and tools. The household is not just a group of people living together. It is also an economic unit. Family members depend upon one another. So when a young person considers marriage, the decision can affect many other people. Parents may have strong opinions. Relatives may become involved. In wealthier families, these discussions could be especially important. Land could be involved. Money could be involved. Property could be involved. A marriage might connect two families. It might strengthen an alliance. It might help preserve an allied. For noble families, marriage could have political importance. For ordinary families, it could have economic importance. But this does not mean that medieval people had no feelings. They did. They experienced affection, disappointment, excitement, friendship, jealousy, loneliness, and love, just as people do in every age. Historical records sometimes preserve letters and poems that show how deeply people could care for one another. Yet the structure around relationships was different. A person's family could have a powerful influence over their choices. In some cases, parents through story encouraged marriages. In other cases, young people had more freedom. And the experience varied greatly according to social class and location. A noble daughter might have very little freedom in choosing a husband. A village couple might have more room to make their own decision. Even then, family approval could matter greatly. Marriage joined households, and households were important, so courtship often involved more than two people. It involved networks of relatives, friends, neighbors, and social connections. Courtship in a noble household. Now, imagine a stone castle. The evening air is cool. The walls are thick. Inside, candles and lamps provide circles of light. A noble family is gathered in a hall. There may be servants moving quietly. There may be food on a long table. There may be conversation about land, money, visitors, and family matters. For nobles, marriage could be a serious matter of family strategy. A marriage might connect to estates. It might strengthen a political relationship. It could affect inheritance. It could influence the future of children. This is one reason medieval romances are often remembered in history. Their marriages could affect entire regions. But it is important not to imagine every noble marriage as cold or without affection. People could become fond of one another. Some couples developed strong partnerships. Some wrote affectionate letters. Some spent years together managing households and raising children. A political marriage could still become a personal relationship. The two ideas were not always opposites. A marriage could begin for practical reasons, and later grow into companionship. And sometimes, of course, affection existed before the marriage. A young noble person might meet someone they genuinely liked, but family expectations could still shape what happened next. The world of medieval nobility was full of rules. There were rules about inheritance, rules about land, rules about social position, rules about religion, rules about acceptable marriages. And so courtship could involve careful conversations between families. People might ask about ancestry. They might discuss property. They might consider whether the match was socially suitable. The romance, if there was one, existed inside this larger structure. A quiet walk through medieval courtship. Let us leave the castle for a while. Return to a village road. Imagine two young people walking some distance apart. Perhaps they are not alone. A family member may be nearby. Perhaps they are walking toward a market. Perhaps they are returning from a religious celebration. There is no need for dramatic music. There is simply the sound of footsteps. The road beneath them. Birds in the distance. The occasional sound of a cart. Courtship could be surprisingly ordinary. People talked. They learned about each other. They asked questions. They spent time with each other's families. A young man might visit a household. A young woman might receive him with relatives nearby. In some communities, young people had opportunities to meet at dances, festivals, fairs, and other gatherings. These events created spaces for conversation. They also created opportunities for people to observe one another. Who was friendly? Who was respectful? Who had a good reputation? Who seemed reliable? In a small community, these things mattered. A relationship was rarely invisible. And because life was communal, courtship often happened within the wider community. This could feel restrictive, but it could also make relationships with surrounded by people who already knew the individuals involved. There was less mystery. There was also less anonymity. Love and religion. Now, as evening becomes darker, let us walk toward a medieval church. For much of medieval Europe, religion was deeply connected to everyday life. The church calendar shaped the year. Religious festivals brought people together. Marriage itself was connected to religious ideas and ceremonies. People thought about marriage not as a relationship, but also as a serious social and religious commitment. The exact practices changed over time. Medieval Christianity developed over many centuries. Ideas about marriage also changed. Church authorities increasingly became involved in questions about whether a marriage was valid. There were rules about who could marry whom. Certain family relationships could prevent a marriage. Religious customs also shaped when weddings could take place. For ordinary people, the local church could therefore be an important part of family life. A wedding might begin with relatives gathering. There might be a procession. There might be prayers. There might be a feast afterwards. And then the couple would return to the ordinary rhythm of life. This is worth remembering. The wedding itself might be a single day. Marriage was the many years that followed. The medieval world placed great importance on household stability. Marriage was connected to children, inheritance, work, property, and family relationships. It was not just a romantic celebration. It was the beginning of another household story. The wedding day. Imagine waking before sunrise on a wedding day. The house is already awake. There is work to do. Food needs to be prepared. Clothing needs to be arranged. Visitors are arriving. Someone is carrying bread. Someone is preparing a fire. Someone is checking the tables. A wedding feast could be an important community event. For wealthier families, it could be elaborate. There might be many guests. There could be music. There could be special clothing. There could be large quantities of food. For poorer families, celebrations would naturally be more modest. But even a modest wedding could be meaningful. The exact customs varied greatly across time and place. There was no single medieval wedding dress in the modern sense. Fashion changed. Styles varied between regions. And the idea of a white wedding dress becoming a standard tradition belongs largely to much later history. A medieval bride might wear clothing in many different colors. The important thing was often was always good clothing. Clean, presentable, perhaps carefully decorated, perhaps made especially for the occasion. Jewelry could also be important among wealthier families. A necklace, brooch, belt, or other object might carry personal or family meaning. For poorer households, clothing was more practical. Every garment required time and resources. Fabric was valuable. Clothes were repaired. They were reused. They were passed between people. So even a wedding garment had a life beyond one single day. The wedding feast. Now, imagine the feast. The room is warm. There is conversation everywhere. People are sitting together. Food is being carried from one table to another. The smell of bread fills the room. Perhaps there is meat. Perhaps there are vegetables, grains, cheese, fish, fruit, or cooked dishes. The exact menu depends on the region, season, and wealth of the family. Medieval food was not simply endless roasted meat. Most people ate what was available locally. Grains were important. Bread and porridge could form a large part of everyday meals. Vegetables and legumes were useful sources of food. Fish was important in many communities. Meat was available in different amounts depending on wealth and location. At a wedding, however, families might try to provide something special. A feast was a way to celebrate. It was also a way to show hospitality. Guests could remember food long after the ceremony had ended.
Now the celebration is over. The guests have gone home. The tables have been cleared. The candles have burned low. And morning comes again. The new couple wakes to ordinary life. This is where medieval marriage truly begins. There are fields to work, animals to care for, food to prepare, clothes to repair, firewood to gather, water to carry, tools to maintain. The wedding may have lasted for a day, but marriage would continue through hundreds and thousands of ordinary mornings. For many medieval people, marriage was closely connected to work. A household was not simply a place where people slept, it was a place where almost everything needed for daily life had to be managed. Food had to be stored, clothing had to be made and repaired, animals needed attention, buildings needed maintenance, children needed care, and when the seasons changed, the work changed with them. A married couple depended on each other's labor. In a farming community, both men and women could contribute to agricultural work. A woman might care for animals. She might prepare food. She might spin wool. She might make or repair clothing. She might work in the garden. And she might also spend long hours in the fields. A man might plow. He might build fences. He might care for larger animals. He might repair tools. He might work with wood or stone. But these roles were never perfectly fixed. People helped wherever help was needed. A good harvest could depend on everyone working together. A difficult season could require even more cooperation. So marriage could become a kind of partnership. Not always a perfect partnership, not always an easy one, but a partnership built around daily life. Perhaps that is one of the quietest parts of medieval marriage. There was very little separation between love and work. The same person you cared about was also the person helping you prepare for winter. The same household where you shared meals was also the place where clothing was repaired and food was stored. The ordinary tasks of life connected people together. And as another evening arrived, the work would slowly come to an end. The tools would be put away, the animals would be settled, the doors would be closed, and the family would return indoors. The medieval village is quiet now. The market has closed. The last footsteps have disappeared from the road. Inside the houses, small fires continue to glow. And as the night becomes deeper, we can slowly return to the lives of the people who lived here. Not kings, not famous knights, not people whose names were written into great books. Just ordinary families, ordinary husbands and wives, parents, children, neighbors, people who woke each morning and continued with the simple work of living. And perhaps, in many ways, this is where medieval marriage becomes most interesting. Because a marriage was not really defined by its wedding day. It was defined by everything that came afterward. The mornings, the meals, the work, the quiet conversations, the changing seasons, and the many small moments that slowly became a shared life. So tonight, let us continue our slow walk through that world. And let us begin with the home itself. The medieval home. Imagine opening the wooden door of a small medieval cottage. The room is simple. There may be a wooden table, a few stools, a chest for clothing, clay pots, tools, bundles of dried herbs, perhaps a small bed covered with rough blankets. And near one wall is the fireplace. The fire is more than a source of warmth. It is part of the heart of the household. Around it, people cook, they work, they talk, they rest. And during the colder months, they gather around it even more closely. For a married couple, this small space is their world. There are no separate rooms for every activity. There is no large kitchen filled with appliances. There is no private office. There is simply the household. Work and family life exist together. A person might prepare food in the same room where another person repairs a tool. A child might sleep nearby while an adult spins wool. Someone might sit by the fire and tell a story while another person prepares tomorrow's meal. The house is rarely completely silent. There are small sounds, the crackle of wood, the movement of footsteps, the scrape of a wooden bowl, the sound of thread being pulled through cloth, the occasional cough, the quiet voices of family members. And at night, these sounds become softer. Eventually, everyone begins to rest. The fire becomes smaller, the candle becomes shorter, and the house settles into darkness. The shared work of marriage. Marriage meant sharing responsibilities. At least in an ideal household, there was always something that needed to be done. Food needed to be prepared. Clothing needed to be repaired. Animals needed attention. Water needed to be collected. Wood needed to be gathered. Fields needed to be worked. Tools needed to be maintained. The list never truly ended. This meant that medieval marriage was closely connected to cooperation. A household could not easily function if everyone simply thought about themselves. People depended on one another. A husband might spend the day working outside. His wife might spend the same day managing work inside the home. But both forms of work supported the same household. And sometimes their responsibilities overlapped. A woman might work in the fields. A man might help with household tasks. Children could also contribute as they grew older. The exact arrangement depended on the family. There was no single pattern that described everyone, but one thing remained common. Daily life required effort. Marriage, therefore, involved more than affection. It involved patience, planning, responsibility, and cooperation. Perhaps that is why the quietest parts of marriage can sometimes tell us the most. A person carrying water for the household may never appear in a history book. Someone repairing a broken chair may never be remembered. Someone preparing bread before sunrise may never become a famous historical figure. But these actions helped keep medieval society alive. Millions of ordinary tasks performed again and again, day after day, year after year. The importance of family. In medieval society, family could be extremely important. People often lived close to relatives, parents, children, siblings, grandparents, cousins, and other members of the wider family. Marriage could therefore create a new connection between families. When two people married, they were not always leaving their previous relationships behind. Instead, they were adding new ones. A husband might gain new relatives through his wife. A wife might become connected to his husband's family. There could be new responsibilities, new visits, new celebrations, new disagreements, and new forms of support. Family networks could help people survive difficult times. If a household needed assistance, relatives might provide it. If someone became sick, family members could help. If a young person needed work, relatives might know someone who could offer an opportunity. These connections mattered. Life could be uncertain. Harvests could fail. Illness could appear. Money could become scarce. And in those moments, having people around you could make a difference. So marriage was also part of a larger network of human relationships. It connected one household to another, one generation to another, and sometimes one village to another. The role of relatives in courtship. Now, let us return to courtship. Imagine a young person beginning to think seriously about marriage. They may not simply choose someone entirely on their own. Parents could have opinions. Relatives could offer advice. Friends might make introductions. Neighbors might know suitable families. A person's background mattered. Their reputation mattered. Their ability to work mattered. Their family connections could matter. And so a potential marriage could become a subject of conversation among many people. Perhaps two families knew each other already. Perhaps their children had grown up nearby. Perhaps they worked together. Perhaps they met at church. Perhaps they encountered one another at a market. A festival created the opportunity. The relationship might slowly develop. There could be conversations, small gifts, family discussions, and eventually, perhaps, an agreement. From the outside, medieval courtship might appear very formal, but beneath the customs were familiar human questions. What kind of person is this? Can I trust them? What is their family like? Will we be able to build a stable household?
do we understand one another? And perhaps the most important question of all, can we imagine living together? A walk through the medieval market. Let us imagine a market day. The morning is cool. The streets are beginning to fill. A baker places fresh bread on a wooden table. A merchant arranges cloth. A farmer brings vegetables. A craftsman displays tools. People greet neighbors as they pass. The market is not only a place for buying and selling. It is also a social space. People meet. People talk. News travels. Families see one another. Young people notice familiar faces.
Medieval courtship and marriage. Calm storytelling for sleep. The village is quiet again. The last lights have disappeared from the windows. The road that was busy during the day now rests beneath the moon. Somewhere beyond the houses, the fields stretch into the darkness, and inside one small home, a family is preparing for another night of sleep. We have already followed medieval courtship from the first meetings to the wedding day. We have watched how families became connected. We have seen how work shaped marriage, and we have imagined the quiet years that followed. But there is still more to discover, because marriage was not simply a relationship between two people. It was a life lived through changing seasons, changing responsibilities, changing families, and changing circumstances. So tonight we will continue our slow journey. There is no need to hurry. Let us simply walk a little further into the medieval world. The first year of marriage. Imagine a young couple returning home after their wedding. The celebration has ended. The guests have gone. The flowers, where there were any, have begun to fade. The borrowed clothing has been returned. And now there is only the house. Their house. Perhaps it is very small. Perhaps it is part of a larger family home. Perhaps it is a room above a workshop. Whatever the setting, the couple now has to learn how to live together. The first year of marriage could involve many small adjustments. Who wakes first? Who prepares the morning meal? Who collects water? Who tends the animals? Who handles particular household tasks? Who visits relatives? Who keeps track of supplies? These questions might not have been written down. They were learned through daily life. One person would discover the habits of the other. Perhaps one liked to wake before sunrise. Perhaps the other preferred to work late. Perhaps one was careful with food stores. Perhaps the other was more relaxed. Marriage meant learning these small differences, and sometimes learning to live with them. There were disagreements. There were misunderstandings. There were moments of laughter too. A shared life was never perfectly smooth. But slowly, routines developed. The couple learned one another's habits, and the unfamiliar home began to feel familiar. Learning to share a house. The medieval home was often a busy place. It could contain family members, children, servants, apprentices, or other relatives. Privacy was limited compared with modern life. A married couple might not always have a room entirely to themselves. This meant that relationships developed within a wider household. A conversation might happen while someone else was nearby. A meal could include several generations. A family decision might involve more than just the husband and wife. This could sometimes be comforting. There were always people around, but it could also make married life complicated. Imagine waking in the morning and hearing voices already moving through the house. Someone is preparing food. Someone is feeding an animal. Someone is opening a door. Someone is calling to another family member. The day has already begun. There is no quiet apartment waiting outside the bedroom. There is simply the household, and the household has work to do. The importance of food. Food connected medieval families in many ways. Meals were not simply about eating, they were part of family life. A household had to decide what could be eaten today and what needed to be saved. Food had to be prepared carefully. Grain had to be stored. Vegetables might be preserved. Meat could be salted or otherwise stored. Bread had to be made. Milk could be turned into other foods. The exact diet depended on location, wealth, and season. But almost everyone had to think about food.
And preparing food could take a great deal of time. Imagine a woman kneeling beside a small fire. A pot hangs above the flames. Nearby, someone prepares bread. A child carries a wooden bowl. Another person enters with vegetables from the garden. Nobody is rushing, but everyone is working. The meal is slowly becoming ready. Eventually, the family sits together. The food is simple. Perhaps bread, perhaps a warm stew, perhaps vegetables, perhaps something else depending on the household. They eat, they talk, and for a little while the work stops. Meals created moments of togetherness, and in a world where daily labor was constant, these moments mattered. The table as a place of connection. Imagine the same family many years later. The table has become worn. The wood shows marks from years of use. The children who once sat there are now older. Perhaps one has left home. Perhaps another is learning a family trade. Perhaps a new baby has joined the household. The table remains. Objects like this rarely appear in great histories. Yet a table could witness decades of family life. Birthdays and festivals. Ordinary meals. Arguments. Reconciliations. Visitors. Good news. Bad news. Long winter evenings. And quiet summer mornings. A household's history could exist in the same room for generations. The walls might be repaired. The roof might be replaced. The furniture might change. But the sense of home could remain. When children arrived, for many medieval couples, children became an important part of married life. But we should remember that not every marriage followed the same path. Some couples had children. Some did not. Some children lived to adulthood. Others did not. Family life could be uncertain. When children did arrive, however, the household changed. There was more work. More food was needed. More clothing. More care. And eventually, more hands to help. A baby might sleep close to the parents. As the child grew, they slowly became part of the household's daily work. A small child might carry simple objects. An older child might help with animals. A young person might learn a trade. Children learn by watching. They watched their parents. They watched neighbors. They watched craftspeople. They watched older siblings. Much of education was practical. A child learned not only from books, but from daily life. Children learning about marriage. Children also watched how adults behaved. A young person could observe their parents' relationship, how they worked together, how they spoke to each other, how they handled disagreements, how they welcomed guests, how they cared for relatives. These lessons were not always spoken aloud. They were simply observed. And eventually, the children themselves would become adults. Some would marry. Some would remain single for a time. Some would leave home for work. Some would enter religious life. Some would become apprentices. Their future depended on many factors: family, opportunity, social position, work, property, and personal circumstances. The path from childhood to marriage was not always direct, but family life helped shape it. Apprentices and young adults. In medieval towns, young people might leave their parents' homes to learn a trade. Imagine a teenager entering a workshop. The master is already working. Tools are arranged around the room. The young apprentice watches carefully. At first, the work may be simple: cleaning, carrying, preparing materials, observing. Slowly, more responsibility is given. Years may pass. The apprentice becomes skilled. Eventually, they may establish their own household. Marriage could become connected to this process. A young craftsperson might need to become economically stable before starting a family. The ability to support a household mattered. So adulthood was often tied to work. Learning a skill was not only about employment. It could also be part of preparing for independent life. Marriage in the family business. Now imagine a small shop. The front opens onto a narrow medieval street. Inside, the family works. The husband is busy with his craft. His wife helps with another part of the business. An older child watches. A younger child plays nearby. A customer enters. There is a quiet conversation. A sale is made. The work continues. In such a household, marriage and business could be connected. The family depended on the workshop. The workshop depended on the family. A successful business could provide stability. A difficult year could affect everyone. This meant that a spouse might not simply be a companion. They could also be a business partner. Their work contributed directly to the household. And this is another reason why medieval marriage cannot be understood only through romantic ideas. Marriage was part of the economic structure of everyday life. Widows and new responsibilities. Now let us consider something more difficult. Sometimes a marriage ended because one partner died. For the surviving spouse, life could change quickly. A widow might suddenly become responsible for children, property, money, household decisions. A widower could face similar responsibilities. The surviving person might need to find ways to continue earning a living. This could be especially difficult when resources were limited. But widows were not simply helpless figures. Some managed businesses. Some controlled property. Some returned to their families. Some remarried. Others remained unmarried. Their experiences varied greatly. The important point is that medieval people had to adapt. Life could change suddenly, and people found ways to continue. The household might change, but the need to eat, work, and care for family remained. Remarriage. Remarriage could become part of medieval life. A widower or widower might decide to marry again. The reasons could vary. Companionship might matter. Family responsibilities might matter. Economic stability might matter. Children might need another adult in the household. There was no single reason. Imagine a household after a difficult period. The family has slowly adjusted. Then another person enters the home. The household changes again. New routines develop. New relationships form. It may take time. A new marriage could bring happiness. It could also create difficulties. Blended families have never been completely simple.
But people in the medieval world, like people in every age, adapted to changing family circumstances. The role of faith. Religion was also part of medieval marriage. For many Europeans, religious beliefs shaped important parts of life. Churches were central to communities. Religious calendars influenced festivals and seasons. Marriage ceremonies were connected to religious traditions. People prayed for their families. They asked for blessings. They marked important events through religious customs. A wedding therefore existed within a larger spiritual world. The couple were not simply beginning a permanent relationship. They were entering a recognized social and religious institution. The exact customs varied across time and place, but religion remained an important part of medieval family life. Imagine the church at sunset. The stone walls are quiet. The last people have gone home. A bell sounds softly across the village. For centuries, that sound would have marked the passing of time. Morning, midday, evening, festival days, ordinary days. The church stood quietly beside the light of the vigil. Festivals and family gatherings. Not every day was a work day. There were festivals, religious celebrations, market, fairs, family gatherings. These occasions could bring people together. Food was shared. Music might be played. People dressed carefully. Visitors arrived from nearby places. Children watched everything. And adults talked. These gatherings could strengthen relationships. A family might visit another family. Old friends might meet. Young people might see one another again. News could travel from village to village. A wedding might be discussed. A new bathing could be introduced. A relative might return after a long absence. These were the social moments that interrupted the ordinary rhythm of medieval life. And when the festival ended, people returned home. The roads became quieter. The houses became dark. And the ordinary rhythm began again. Winter in a medieval house. Let us now move into winter. The fields are empty. The trees are bare. The days are short. Inside the cottage, the fire becomes more important. The family stays indoors longer. This is a season for repair. Clothing is mended. Tools are maintained. Food stores are checked. Wool is spun. Stories are told. People talk. The darkness outside arrives early, and the household becomes a small world of warmth. For a married couple, winter could provide more time together. There was still work, but the pace of agricultural labor had changed. Evenings could stretch longer. The fire might burn for hours. Someone might tell a story about a relative. Someone might remember an old festival. Someone might talk about the coming spring. And slowly the hours pass. The fire crackles. The wind moves outside. The children become sleepy. And one by one, everyone settles down. Then, after many weeks of cold, spring arrives.
The night has grown deeper now. The medieval village rests beneath a quiet sky. The roads are empty. The market stalls are closed. The last few fires glow softly behind wooden walls. And somewhere inside one of these homes, another ordinary family is preparing for sleep. We have followed courtship. We have followed weddings. We have seen the work of marriage, the role of family, the changing seasons, and the quiet routines of the household. But there is another part of medieval marriage worth exploring. It is the part that happened slowly. The building of trust, the sharing of responsibilities, the small habits that developed between two people. Because a marriage was not created in one day. It was built over years, sometimes gently, sometimes with difficulty, and often through moments so ordinary that nobody thought to write them down. So tonight, let us continue our slow journey, and let us look more closely at the quiet life that existed after the wedding. The morning routine. Imagine the first light of morning touching the rooftops. The sky is pale. The fields are covered in soft mist. A rooster calls somewhere beyond the cottages. Inside the house, someone wakes. The fire has nearly gone out. The room is cold. Before the day can properly begin, the fire needs to be started again. Wood is placed carefully among the remaining embers. A small flame appears, then another. Soon the room begins to warm. This is how many medieval mornings could begin. Not with an alarm clock, not with bright electric lights, but with darkness slowly becoming morning. The household wakes gradually. Someone prepares food. Someone collects water. Someone checks the animals. Someone prepares tools for the day. The married couple begins another morning together. Perhaps they speak very little. There is work to do, and work has a way of creating its own rhythm. A glance, a short sentence, a shared task, a familiar routine. After many years, these small actions can become almost automatic. One person knows what the other needs. One person reaches for something before being asked. The other understands. This kind of familiarity is difficult to describe. It is not dramatic. It simply grows, day after day, year after year. When habits become familiar, every household develops habits.
Some are large, most are small. Perhaps one person always sits in the same place. Perhaps someone prefers a particular bowl. Perhaps a certain task is always done before breakfast. Perhaps the children know exactly when their parents begin preparing for bed. These habits create a sense of order, and order was valuable in a world where life could be unpredictable. The weather could change. A harvest could fail. A person could become sick. A roof could leak. An animal could become ill. There were many things that families could not control. But inside the household, small routines could create stability. Marriage was part of that stability. Two people could become familiar with one another's rhythms. They knew when the other was tired. They knew when something was wrong. They knew which tasks needed to be done. They knew the history of the household. A stranger might see only a simple cottage, but the couple inside knew every corner, every object, every sound, every memory. Now imagine a rainy afternoon. Rain falls steadily against the roof. The fields are too wet for some kinds of work. The road has become muddy. People stay closer to home. Inside the cottage, the atmosphere is different. The fire burns. The room smells of smoke and warm food. A woman repairs clothing. A man works on a wooden tool. A child watches. The rain continues. There is no need to hurry. For a moment, the outside world is almost completely separated from the household. This could be a good time for conversation. Perhaps the couple talks about the coming harvest. Perhaps they discuss a relative. Perhaps they remember something from the previous festival. Perhaps they simply listen to the rain. Quiet weather could create quiet moments. And quiet moments were part of marriage too. Not every meaningful memory came from a celebration. Some came from sitting together while rain fell outside. The importance of trust. Trust was important in any household. A person needed to know that others would carry their share of responsibilities. If one person promised to complete a task, the other needed to believe it would be done. If food needed to be saved, someone had to protect the household supplies. If money or property was involved, trust became even more important. Marriage could therefore create a relationship of dependence. Two people might depend on each other for daily survival. This could make trust very valuable. And trust is rarely created instantly. It grows slowly. A person keeps a promise. Then another. They help during a difficult season. They remember something important. They show up when needed. Over time, these actions create familiarity. And familiarity can become trust. The medieval world understood the importance of reputation. But within a household, personal trust mattered just as much. A person might be known as reliable by an entire village, but their spouse knew them in a much more personal way. They knew their habits, their worries, their strengths, their weaknesses, their private hopes. This was another side of marriage that formal documents could rarely capture. When couples disagreed. Of course, no household was perfect. Married couples could disagree. People could become frustrated. Arguments could happen. A person might feel tired after a long day. Another might feel that too much work had been placed on them. There could be disagreements about money, food, children, relatives, work, property. These were not uniquely medieval problems. They are human problems. The difference was that medieval people lived in a world where there were fewer ways to escape household difficulties. The family home was also the workplace. The community was close. Relatives were often nearby. Privacy could be limited. A disagreement could therefore affect more than two people. But people also had ways of repairing relationships. They talked. They apologized. Family members intervened. Relatives gave advice. Life continued. Not every disagreement ended a relationship. Sometimes people simply learned how to live with differences. And sometimes, after a difficult conversation, an ordinary evening returned. The fire continued burning. Dinner was prepared. The children went to sleep. Tomorrow came. The role of neighbors. In a medieval village, neighbors could be important. A person might know the families living nearby for many years. They could share tools, help with difficult work, exchange food, watch children, offer assistance during illness, or simply talk. Marriage therefore existed within a community. A couple did not live completely alone. Their neighbors knew them, their relatives knew them, their friends knew them, and community relationships could provide support. Imagine two households preparing for winter. One has extra wood fire, the other has extra grain. Perhaps they exchange what they have. No formal contract is needed. They know one another. They trust one another. This kind of cooperation could make village life more manageable, and married couples were part of these networks. The medieval neighborhood. Let us walk slowly through the village. The road curves between several houses. There is a small garden, a wooden fence, a well, a workshop, a larger home belonging to a wealthier family. Further away, the church stands quietly. Every house has its own story. In one, a young couple has just married. In another, an older widow lives with her children. In another, a craftsman and his wife run a workshop. Another house contains several generations. Another may belong to someone who lives alone. The village is not one story. It is hundreds of stories happening at the same time. Some people are beginning families. Others are raising children. Others are growing old. Some are preparing for marriage. Some are grieving. Some are celebrating. Life is always changing. And yet the village continues. Courtship after the wedding. The word courtship usually makes us think about the time before marriage. But in a broader sense, getting to know someone never completely ends. A couple continues learning about one another. A person changes with age. Their responsibilities change. Their family grows. Their work changes. Their health changes. Their hopes may change. A marriage that lasts many years is therefore a long process of adjustment. The person you married at one age may be very different decades later. And so the relationship must change too. This is something medieval couples would have experienced just as people do now. The young farmer becomes an older farmer. The young wife becomes a mother. The children become adults. The household becomes quieter. And eventually the couple becomes the older generation. Life moves forward. When children leave home, imagine a household after many years. The children are now adults. One has become an apprentice. Another has married. Another has moved to another town. The house is quieter. There are fewer voices. Fewer footsteps. Fewer small objects lying around. For parents, this could be a strange transition. The home that once felt crowded now feels different. Perhaps they remember when their children were small. Perhaps they look at an old wooden toy. Perhaps they remember teaching a child how to work. Perhaps they remember a wedding. Now that child has a household of their own. The cycle continues. A new generation begins. And the older couple remains behind. Their family has expanded outward. The return of children. Yet families often remained connected. A married child might return to visit. Perhaps with their own spouse. Perhaps with children. The old home becomes busy again. There is food, conversation, laughter, stories. The grandchildren run through the doorway. For a short time, the household feels young again. An older grandparent may watch the children quietly, perhaps remembering their own childhood, perhaps remembering their own parents. Generations overlap. The past and future meet inside the same room. This is one of the quiet patterns of family history. People grow older. Children become parents. Parents become grandparents. And the same stories are sometimes told again. Medieval marriage anniversaries. We should be careful not to imagine modern anniversary customs everywhere in medieval Europe. People did mark important.
The medieval village is quiet once again. The moon hangs above the rooftops. A few clouds move slowly across the sky. The fields are dark, and the narrow roads are empty. Inside the homes, families have finished their work. The last bowls have been put away. The fires have been lowered. And one by one, the candles disappear. Tonight, we return to the quiet world of medieval marriage. Not the grand ceremonies. Not the castles. Not the famous families. But the ordinary people who lived through ordinary years. We have already followed their courtship. We have watched their weddings. We have seen their homes and their daily work. Now, let us look at something even quieter. The way relationships changed with time. The way husbands and wives became familiar with one another. The way family memories were created. And the way a simple household could become an entire world. So settle in. Let the modern world become distant. And imagine the soft sound of a medieval village beginning another day. The house before sunrise. Before the sun rises, the village is almost completely dark. The sky is deep blue. The fields are silent. Inside a small cottage, the embers of the fireplace glow faintly.
A person wakes. The room is cold. There is work to begin. Slowly, the fire is brought back to life. A little wood is added. A small flame appears. Then the warmth begins to return. The household starts moving. Someone prepares water. Someone prepares food. Someone checks the animals. Someone gathers the tools needed for the day. A married couple begins another morning. Perhaps they have been married for only a few months. Perhaps for 30 years. Either way, the morning routine may feel familiar. They know what needs to happen. They know where everything is. They know who usually does each task. And this familiarity is one of the quiet results of a long marriage. People learn one another's rhythms. They know when to speak. They know when to remain quiet. They know which tasks need help. They know when the other person is tired. Years of shared life create a language without many words. Morning food is simple. Bread. Porridge. Perhaps cheese. Perhaps something left from the previous evening. The exact meal depends on the household and the season. But food must be prepared. And food takes work. Grain must be stored. Bread must be made. Fire must be maintained. Water must be collected. A simple meal is never quite as simple as it looks. Someone has worked to make it possible. The family eats together. There may not be much conversation. Everyone knows the day ahead will be busy. But for a few minutes the household sits together. The meal is warm. The fire is warm. The morning is still quiet. And then the work begins. When the husband leaves for work. Imagine a farming household. The husband prepares his tools. The fields need attention. He steps outside. The morning air is cool. His wife remains near the house. There is still plenty of work waiting. Perhaps there is bread to prepare. Clothing to repair. Animals to care for. Children to watch. Food to store. The work is different, but it is still work. And both sides support the same household. The couple may spend much of the day apart. But their work remains connected. The farmer needs food prepared. The household needs the farmer's work in the fields. Neither role exists completely by itself. This is how many families survived. Through cooperation. Through routine. Through countless small tasks. Working through the seasons. The medieval year moved with the seasons. Spring brought planting. Summer brought long days. Autumn brought harvest. Winter brought cold and shorter days. Marriage had to move with this rhythm too. A couple might spend one season working from sunrise until evening. Then another season mostly indoors. The amount of work changed. The food changed. The weather changed. The mood of the household changed. But the family continued. Imagine autumn. The fields are golden. The harvest is coming in. Everyone is busy. There is little time for long conversations.
The household work together. Children help where they can. Neighbors help one another. At the end of the day, everyone is tired. But there is satisfaction too. Food has been gathered. Supplies are being stored. Another year has moved forward. Now winter arrives. The fields are quiet. The trees are bare. Snow or cold rain may cover the countryside. People spend more time indoors. The fireplace becomes important again. A married couple sits beside it. Perhaps one repairs a tool. The other works with wool. A child sleeps nearby. There is no need to rush. Winter nights can feel long, and long evenings create space for conversation. Perhaps the couple talks about their children. Perhaps they remember relatives. Perhaps they discuss plans for spring. Perhaps they simply sit together. The fire makes a gentle sound. Outside, the wind moves across the roof. Inside, the household is warm. These are the moments that can become memories. Marriage and personal space. It is easy to imagine medieval couples spending every moment together. But that was not necessarily true. People had different responsibilities. Men might work outside the home. Women might have their own work. Children had tasks. Craftspeople worked in workshops. Merchants travelled. Farmers went into the fields. So even within marriage, people could have separate parts of the day. This separation could create something valuable. When two people returned home, they had experiences to share. A farmer might talk about the field. A craftsperson might describe a customer. A wife might mention something that happened in the village. A child might have learned something new. The household became a place where the day's separate experiences came together. Small conversations. Not every conversation was important. Most were probably very ordinary. Did you collect the water? Is there enough grain? Will you visit your mother tomorrow? Can the roof wait until next week? Where is the tool? These small questions may seem unimportant. But relationships are made from small conversations. A shared life requires constant communication. The medieval world was no different. People needed to know what others were doing. They needed to plan. They needed to remember. And sometimes they simply wanted to talk. Perhaps the conversation slowly moved away from work. Perhaps someone remembered an old story. Perhaps someone laughed. The fire continued burning. The evening became quieter. Visiting relatives. Family visits could be important. A married couple.
The medieval village is quiet once again. Night has settled over the rooftops. The roads are empty. The fields rest beneath the moonlight. And inside the small houses, the final sounds of the day are slowly disappearing. A wooden door closes. A fire is covered. A bowl is placed on a shelf. Someone whispers good night. Then silence. Tonight we continue our slow journey through medieval courtship and marriage. We have followed young people meeting one another. We have imagined family discussions. We have watched weddings begin. We have followed couples through work, children, changing seasons, and old age. But there is still another part of the story. the memories people carried, the traditions they passed down, the small customs that helped families understand who they were. So let us walk quietly into that world. There is no need to hurry. The night is long, and the medieval village is waiting. The old family story. Imagine a winter evening. Snow covers the ground outside. Inside the house, a fire burns steadily. Several generations are gathered together. The youngest children sit close to the warmth. An older family member begins to tell a story. It is a story they have told many times. Perhaps it begins with a wedding. A young man and woman. A village. A journey. A difficult winter. A family celebration. The children listen. They may already know parts of the story, but they want to hear it again. This is how family history could survive, not always through written books, sometimes through memory. One generation remembered something, then told it to another. The details could change. Names could be forgotten. Some parts could become uncertain. But the basic story remained, and a family could carry its past in this way for many years. The memory of a wedding. A wedding could become one of those memories. Perhaps an older couple remembered the day they married. They might remember the clothing, the people who attended, the meal, the church, the weather, the journey home. Decades later, some of those details might still be remembered. Their children might hear the story, then their grandchildren. A wedding that lasted only one day could become a memory lasting generations. And this tells us something important. A wedding was not only an event, it could become part of a family's identity. It could mark the beginning of a new branch of the family, a new home, a new generation. Names mattered. A person might be known by their given name, but they could also be connected to their family, occupation, location, or another identifying feature. As generations passed, family names and identities became more established in many places. A person's name could connect them to their parents, their village, their trade, their family history. For married couples, this could create another connection between households. Two families became connected through marriage. Children inherited parts of both family histories. The household became a meeting place between generations. And so marriage was not simply about the present. It also connected people to the future. The wedding feast. Let us return to the day of the wedding. The ceremony has ended. Now comes the meal. Food has been prepared. Guests gather. The household is busy. There may be bread, meat or fish, depending on place and wealth, vegetables, cheese, drinks. The exact food varies greatly, but the purpose is simple. People are together. They eat. They talk. They celebrate. A feast can turn a private marriage into a public event. The community sees the couple. Families meet. Friends gather. And the new relationship becomes part of the wider social world. The meal may last for hours. Stories are told.
People laugh. Children move around the gathering. Eventually, the evening arrives. The guests begin to leave. The road becomes quieter. The couple return home. And the great day becomes an ordinary night. What happens after the wedding? The morning after a wedding can feel surprisingly ordinary. The sun still rises. Animals still need food. Bread still needs to be prepared. Tools still need to be used. The fields still need attention. Life does not stop because two people have married. In fact, marriage often means more responsibilities begin. The couple must establish routines. They must manage their resources. They may begin planning for children. They must become part of one another's families. The excitement of the wedding fades. But the real work begins. This is where marriage becomes everyday life.
The medieval village is quiet. The long day has ended. The market stalls are empty now, and the narrow streets are covered in darkness. A few stars can be seen above the rooftops. Inside the houses, families are settling down. The fires are low, the doors are closed, and the sounds of daily life are slowly disappearing. Tonight, we will continue our gentle journey through medieval courtship and marriage. We have followed people when they were young. We have watched them meet, marry, work, raise families, and grow old. But there is another part of their story worth exploring. What happened when people looked beyond their own household? How did marriages connect communities? How did families maintain relationships? And what happened when a couple became part of a much larger network of relatives, neighbors, friends, and traditions? So, as the night becomes quieter, let us take another slow walk through medieval life. The village awakes. Imagine the first light of morning. The sky is still pale. Mist rests over the fields. A few birds begin to make quiet sounds. Inside a cottage, someone wakes and carefully brings the fire back to life. The household begins moving. There is water to collect, food to prepare, animals to feed, clothing to arrange, tools to gather. Another day has begun. For a married couple, these mornings may eventually become almost identical. The same door, the same table, the same fireplace, the same path outside. But familiarity does not necessarily make life meaningless. In fact, routine can become comforting. A person knows what the other person will do. A task is completed without being asked. A bowl is placed on the table. The fire is prepared. The animals are checked. Small actions become part of a shared language. And over many years, these tiny habits can become the structure of a marriage. The household as a small community. A medieval household could contain more people than just a married couple and their children. Relatives might live nearby. Servants might be present in wealthier homes. Apprentices could live with masters. Older family members might remain in the household. But the exact arrangement greatly depended on the place and the family's circumstances. But one thing was clear. The household was part of a larger community. A marriage therefore connected people to others. A husband gained relatives. A wife gained relatives. Children connected generations. Neighbors became familiar, and friendships could develop around work and daily life. A household was never completely isolated. When two families became one. Imagine two families preparing for a wedding. They already have their own histories, their own traditions, their own habits, their own relatives. Now, through marriage, these two groups become connected. A new relationship begins. The families may visit one another. They may share meals. They may exchange gifts. They may help each other during difficult times. The newly married couple becomes the bridge between two households, and their children may carry parts of both family histories. This could continue for generations. One marriage could create connections that lasted long after the original couple had grown old. Family networks. In medieval communities, relatives could be important sources of support. If someone needed help, family might be the first place they looked. A relative could provide food, a temporary place to stay, advice, work, a connection to another household, or simply companionship. Imagine a young couple moving to a nearby town. They may not know many people there, but perhaps one of their relatives lives nearby. That relative can introduce them to neighbors. Perhaps another family helps them find work. A third person provides useful information. The network grows. Marriage was therefore more than a private relationship. It could expand a person's social world. The journey to visit family. Travel in medieval Europe was much slower than modern travel. A journey between nearby places could take time. Roads could be rough. Weather could make travel difficult. People often traveled on foot or by animal, depending on their circumstances, so visiting relatives could require planning. Imagine a married couple preparing for a journey. Food is packed, clothing is prepared, the road ahead is considered. They leave in the morning. The village slowly disappears behind them. The path continues through fields. Perhaps they pass another settlement. Perhaps they stop to rest. Eventually, after many hours or perhaps longer, they arrive. A familiar face appears at the door. The journey was worth it. The joy of a family visit. Inside the house, conversation begins. News is exchanged. Food is offered. Someone asks about the children. Someone asks about the harvest. Someone wants to know how the journey was. The visitor tells a story. The host remembers an old family event. For a while, the two households feel like one. This kind of gathering could strengthen family connections. People did not have instant messages. They could not simply call someone whenever they wished. Seeing a relative could be an important event. A letter carried meaning, and when the visitors eventually left, the household would remember them. The role of letters. For people who could write, letters offered another way to maintain connections, but literacy was not universal. Written communication was more common among certain groups and in particular settings. When letters were available, they could carry information across distance, a message about family, business, property, travel, or important news. Imagine a letter arriving at a household. Someone opens it carefully. The family gathers around. The words are read aloud. A distant relative suddenly feels a little closer. The letter may be short, but it has traveled a long way, and for the people receiving it, that journey matters. A marriage between distant families. Sometimes marriage could connect people from different places. This was especially important among wealthy or noble families. A marriage could create a relationship between households separated by considerable distance. The wedding might require travel. Guests could come from far away. The marriage could strengthen political or economic connections. For ordinary people, the distances were often smaller, but even a nearby marriage could bring new relationships. A spouse might come from another village, another town, another community. Suddenly, a person had a reason to travel somewhere they had never considered home before. Learning a new family. Imagine becoming part of another household. Everything is familiar, yet unfamiliar. The way meals are prepared might be slightly different. The household may have different routines. People may speak differently. There may be different expectations. A new spouse has to learn. Where does this belong? Who usually does this task? When does the family visit relatives? Which festivals are especially important? What stories does everyone know? It takes time, but slowly the new person becomes familiar. The unfamiliar household becomes home. The role of mothers and fathers. Parents often played an important role in family life. They raised children. They taught skills. They helped arrange important matters. They offered advice. But parents also had to watch their children become adults. This could be difficult. A child who was once small eventually wanted independence. A son might leave to become an apprentice. A daughter might marry and move elsewhere. The household changes. The parent remains behind. This is one of the oldest patterns in human life. Children grow. Children leave. Parents remember. The empty room. Imagine a room that once belonged to a child. Years ago it was full of noise. Children played there. Clothing was stored there. A small wooden object sat in the corner. Now the room is quiet. The child has grown. Perhaps they are married. Perhaps they live in another town.
The parent enters the room occasionally. The objects remain, a reminder of earlier years. This is the quiet side of family history. People do not stay the same age. Households change.